Welcome to tonight's presentation from Virtualize Everything. As you can see, I'm back standing in front of our budget network rack. This budget network rack I've been building out over time with a couple of different laptops and used computers. I haven't spent more than $100 on any one component in this network rack. Well, up until now. So we just added a managed switch. I'll provide a link to the unit we did below because as far as the model number, it escapes me at the moment. I believe I spent about $120 on this unit, but this unit gives me the ability to manage VLANs. So we're actually able to add, in my decision, a second network interface and move some more of the traffic around. Later in this video, I'll show you how I set up VLANs on Proxmox and talk a little bit more about the networking that I set up here for this particular setup. But what I'm doing is this second switch, you noticed, has remained. And that switch is handling all basic network communications for the cluster. So we'll be adding some more data onto this that'll be piped in directly to the cluster. But then any outward communication, either to our gateway here or to any of the rest of our network, like this line heading out to one of our particular computers, and the two extra lines that'll eventually head out for Wi-Fi connections for other parts of our network, are all going to be managed by this switch. Now we may find that we have a couple other switches placed throughout the house when we need to break out for other components. But this switch is going to be the main backbone for the period of time until it needs to be upgraded due to either more ports or expanding the network, or we add on a few other devices. This switch also supports trunking, so if I need to add a switch off in another part of the house, I can actually run two lines or a single 2.5 gig line, putting it on either of these ports. I also support SFI 10 gig connections through these ports. So there is a good amount of expandability here on this switch. All right, let's go off and fire up the Proxmox web interface and talk a little bit more about how the network was configured and how I set up the VLANs. So I talked a little bit in the previous section of this video about that we had set up VLANs. And here is what the new network configuration for every single node on our network looks like. Now, some of the advantages of this, as you can notice, pfSense or FreedomPF has moved from the cube up here to the laptop. I could also easily now migrate the VM for pfSense to bad screen or to the cube or anywhere I want on any of these nodes, because every node has the same network configuration at this point. So the cube doesn't have, even though they're installed, more configured network ports than the laptop or bad screen. I've gone one step that you actually don't need to do here, and I've left a port configured for network communication for the cluster. I did this for a few reasons. One of the big ones is that it frees up the rest of my network hardware from having to communicate cluster communications. And as I add data and other things to the network, I just feel that it's a good idea to separate it. TrueSANs running iSCSI and others don't have any network traffic on them other than data traffic. So it's a good thing to remove it. It just frees up bandwidth, especially when we're working with slower ports. Some of these ports on these two systems are only 10100. The cube has gigabit ports, and we do have a gigabit port here for VLANs on the laptop. My new adapter for bad screen hasn't come in yet, so that's still running a 10100 USB adapter, but that'll be upgrading soon enough. Anyways, with that, you can see that we now have Linux VLANs applied here. And in a minute, we're going to switch over to a demo Proxmox installation, and I'm going to show you how I set this up. But essentially, we're going to create some ports from a port, And then we're going to create our bridges from there. So with that, let's take a quick look at some of the configurations that I have in our new switch and the actual switch that we're going to use. So here's the VLAN configuration I'm using now. And you can see port 8 here is marked as untagged traffic. That's traffic coming in from our gateway or our ISP. And then we have tagged traffic here. Now you can see all 3 ports here are tagged traffic for both VLAN 1 and VLAN 2. And these are the 3 ports that are taken up by each member of our node. Now traffic for VLAN tag 2, you notice also can go out untagged or come in untagged and then be tagged for heading on port 5. That is for a system. You'll notice I'll add a few more in as on ports 4, 6, and 7 as I add other components to this network and continue to build out this network. All right, so here's the Amazon posting, and I misquoted this price of this unit. It was a little bit old when I purchased it, or a little bit of a time ago that I purchased it. It now is retailing for $179. It's not cheap, but it's a great unit, being a 12-port unit supporting 10 gig and 2.5 gig, as well as 8 1 gig ports for a beginner unit. It offers a lot of expandability and a lot of use in most home lab networks. All right, so now that we've talked about this, and let's go over to our demo system. Here's a demo system that's actually hosted here on the Cube, but it's going to allow me to show you how to set up VLANs on a network. So we're going to select our node, and we're going to select networking. Now this system has the default bridge right here that was created when Proxmox was installed. This is how most normal networks are set up for Proxmox. So here's our one adapter. I like to hit edit and copy and paste here. This is more because some of the larger names for USB adapters can get quite long and hard to type. ENS18 isn't bad. But then we can go here and we can create our first VLAN. Now, you notice VLAN 0 here. And you notice that VLAN tag is actually grayed out and it says 0. The name, if we changed it to VLAN 1, the VLAN tag changes to 1. So keep that in mind as you configure VLANs in whatever managed switch you purchase and in Proxmox. Now, I'm just going to paste our port in, and I don't want to assign any IP address to this. I could assign an IP address to this and use it as a management console, but I don't want to. So we're just going to hit create. Now that we've created our VLAN, we can actually create a bridge from it. So again, we go to create, and this time we just create a Linux bridge, just like we would have before. And in the case of, say, VLAN 1, like we were talking about here, where we have data traffic coming and we want to communicate at this present time due to Wi-Fi not being set up yet for any other VLAN. So we're working on 192.168.1 via our laptop to manage our network and continue to build it out. We're going to want to distribute internet and other traffic through our system. So we're going to want to give our Proxmox a gateway, or maybe not a gateway because our other port's going to work as a gateway, but we're going to want to give it at least an IP address so we have a management console. So keep in mind, some of my peers have talked about setting up a separate network for a management console, and it is a good idea. Like, a management network allows you to set separate management rules and such. But then we'll go ahead and apply IP addresses to other ports. Any port that Proxmox has an IP address assigned to can be used for management on the web interface. So just keep that in mind when trying to set up a management port. If you have other ports with IP addresses assigned to them in Proxmox, they can be used for a management interface. All right, so and then of course we need to add our standard CID notation, and we're using 24. Then we can add. Now here for bridges, we need to create this as VLAN aware, and we need to add the bridge of VLAN 1. Now we can create it. And it's telling us that I can't use the gateway because we configured the gateway up here, and that's fine. We'll delete it out. And we can hit create. Now let's go ahead and remove that gateway so you could see by hitting edit. So you can see that we can use gateways. There. Now, all I need to do to apply this configuration at this point, now that we've set up our VLANs and our bridge, is hit apply configuration. There you have it. That is all that's required for adding VLANs to your network. And you can see how this can be used even in your budget system here to create a very nice, slim network. Now, I did use 2 network adapters on this, and this is by my own choice. But if you didn't want to add a USB adapter, or you wanted to build this network out like I did later on, segregating traffic without multiple Ethernet ports and cabling running everywhere as a rat in a rat's nest, I know mine is right now, and we'll fix that in a coming day. But yeah, it's quite easy to use VLANs to segregate traffic with a managed switch. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and you can begin adding VLANs to your Proxmox server or Proxmox cluster. As always, have a good night.